Here on Nerd, Aaron Waller coming back at you with another video, and today I want to talk about the Fantastic Four. No, not that Fantastic Four, or that Fantastic Four, but the new Fantastic Four, the ones that are going to be joining the MCU. Now, not much is known. It was recently announced at Disney's Investor Day that Marvel's first family will be joining the MCU upcoming. Not a lot of new information has been announced as of yet, other than a new logo and the fact that Jon Watts, the director of Spider-Man Far From Home and Spider-Man Homecoming, will be helming the movie. So that got me, and I'm sure the rest of the internet, thinking, who's going to play the Fantastic Four? What's going to set it apart from other versions that we've seen in the past? What's the story going to be? Well, all those questions are going to be answered right here in this video, so let's go ahead and get started. So I think the best place to start is trying to figure out who will be the faces of the MCU first family. Who's going to be portraying these characters? We've seen a couple of iterations in the past, but let's go ahead and move forward and see who's going to be coming into the MCU. And let me know down in the comment section down below as we go along if you agree or who your picks for Marvel's Fantastic Four should be. Up first, we have the patriarch of the family, Reed Richards. Now, Reed is often considered the world's smartest man in the world of the Marvel comics, so he is very well versed and knows a lot of different stuff. So we've got to have somebody who's a good leader, who's very intelligent, who just sort of commands a presence. And there have been a lot of speculation as to who that could be. And to be quite honest with you, one of the internet's most popular fan choices is also my first pick, and that is John Krasinski as Mr. Fantastic. Now, Krasinski once even tried out for Captain America, obviously didn't get it. That went to Chris Evans, who coincidentally played the Human Torch back in 2005's Fantastic Four. But I think that he would be the best one, as he has this certain presence. That he can be intelligent, probably a little bit wisecracking here and there, a little bit manic at times because he's going to have to stretch himself thin both figuratively and literally as Mr. Fantastic, as he has the powers of plasticity. So how they're going to be able to have to get that portrayal through, I think Krasinski already being kind of a tall, lanky kind of guy, it kind of just comes naturally. Plus, if you've seen some of the fan cast edits, they look pretty amazing. But for an alternate pick, I think that I would go with somebody who probably doesn't have as big of a name as Krasinski, and that's Patrick Wilson. Now, we've seen him a couple of times. He's been in DC's universe as Ocean Master, fighting off against Arthur Curry, aka Aquaman, but I don't think that was the right role for him. I think that he could definitely pull off a role like Reed Richards, much in the way Krasinski does, but a little bit darker. I don't think Marvel would choose him, but I think he would definitely be a great pick for Reed. Up next, we have Sue Storm. She is very much the glue that holds together all the members of the Fantastic Four, but she has the powers of invisibility and can create force fields. So Sue is a little bit of a special case because you have to have somebody who has sort of that motherly touch, is the best way to put it. Somebody who can bring these characters and force them to realize, hey, maybe you're not doing this the best way, and family is maybe number one. And I think probably one of the best picks for that, and it kind of just goes hand in hand with Mr. Fantastic, has to be Krasinski's own wife, which is Emily Blunt, who's also been very widely fan cast as Sue Storm. Now, Emily Blunt has gotten her feet wet several times in various action-y type of movies. She's done Edge of Tomorrow. She's also doing upcoming Jungle Cruise with Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, which is also under the Disney umbrella. So I think maybe she's kind of got her foot in the door, possibly going into the MCU. So it wouldn't surprise me if she does end up being Sue Storm. And I think just the obvious chemistry, other than being married to John Krasinski, just goes hand in hand to really sell the fact that these two characters are in a relationship, because they really are. They have kids together. But if I had to pick an alternate for this role, I think Blake Lively would do a really good job. Mainly because I feel like she is that sort of quiet and reserved, but if you did have to get right up into somebody's face to tell them, hey, we need to solve this together, and I think Blake Lively could definitely pull that off as well. On to the hothead of the family, which is Johnny Storm. Now, Johnny is Sue Storm's little brother. He's very much a wisecracking type of guy, and he also gets the powers of being able to turn his whole body into flames, which also gives him the ability to fly. Now, this one was a tough one to choose because there's already been very heavy fan cast for not only Dacre Montgomery from Stranger Things and Power Rangers, but also from Zac Efron to portray Johnny Storm. I think both could definitely pull off the look, but I'm not sure if they could pull off the charisma part of Johnny Storm. And although the physicality of it is very important, when he does go flame on and gets the flames all over his body, I don't think that matters too much. So I'm gonna go with somebody that's a little bit different from those guys. And one of my favorites and personal favorite actors of the list that I made for Johnny is Taron Egerton. Now, I know he's probably not everyone's favorite pick. He's been very much in the action realm as he was in the Kingsman movies, but not much is known about him outside of that. He's done Rocketman and a couple of other things, but I think there's just something about him that brings that cockiness of Johnny Storm with a little bit of that physicality. Maybe not all of it because he is a little bit of a smaller guy, but I think he could definitely pull off the chemistry of bouncing back off of Sue Storm and having that little brother sort of attitude, but at the same time being that tough guy, and we know he has the ability to do it, to pull off those action scenes, to be awesome and basically just tear through anything and get the job done when he has to, even though he kind of wants to mess around most of the time. And Taron Egerton actually reminds me a lot of Chris Evans' Johnny Storm from 2005's Fantastic Four, which was probably one of the best parts of that particular movie was Chris Evans. So since you can't get him, I think Egerton might be able to just squeak out a good enough performance that reminds you of that, but he adds his own flavor to it. Now for my second pick, it's going to be a little bit more out there. It's going to be one that's also a Stranger Things alum, but I feel like there's just something about him that could pull it off in just all of the right ways, and that's Joe Keery. Now, don't get me wrong, before you start hating me down in the comments section, I feel like he definitely has the prowess of being that smooth guy, as we've seen him kind of portray that as Steve in Stranger Things, but there's just sort of that cockiness mixed with that sort of sensitive side that he wants to protect. I think Joe Keery would do an amazing job as a Johnny Storm. He just feels like he could fill those shoes. Again, I don't think he's the most popular choice, but I think he's one of the best ones. And that leads me into the final member and the solid foundation of the Fantastic Four, which is Ben Grimm. Now, Ben was just a normal guy, but after the incident that causes all of the characters to get their powers, he turns into the Thing, which is basically just a guy made out of rocks, which can basically be indestructible in a lot of ways, but he really struggles with the fact that his physicality has changed to a degree that he can't even turn it off. So you have to get somebody who's kind of sensitive about their look. He'll most likely be CGI, so you can play a little bit in a different realm using different people to fill the character of Ben Grimm. And this too was a very difficult list for me to make, but I narrowed it down to two, the first of which being Aaron Paul. Now, I feel like he kind of mixes with the Joe Keery vibe of maybe he doesn't necessarily fit this character, but I feel like Aaron Paul's background that allowed him to be in Breaking Bad, he has that dramatic aspect. He can definitely play that sort of more grizzled type of guy as he has in the past, but he's also very fun and can have a lot of quippy things to go back and forth on and butt heads with Johnny Storm. I feel like Aaron Paul would really fill out that role perfectly by having his sort of bigger presence in a CGI character, but when we see him as a human, you kind of believe that this guy would just be like that sort of rough and tumble type of guy. And for the runner-up, I went with somebody who's familiar with sort of portraying a monster or wearing those suits, also happens to be a Stranger Things alum, and that is David Harbour. I feel like he could really fill out the role. I mean, he's already a big guy, so you probably wouldn't have to add too much CGI, but if you added enough, it would be realistic. Plus, I feel like his voice and just sort of his demeanor matches Ben Grimm the most naturally. So I feel like he could definitely fill the shoes, or in this case, fill the rocks of Ben Grimm. And of course, what's any fan cast without figuring out the villain of the Fantastic Four, which in most cases is Doctor Doom. Now, it hasn't been confirmed that he will be the villain of this movie, but he's so synonymous with the Fantastic Four. He was the villain in both iterations in 2005 and 2015. I'm just kind of assuming that he will most likely be the villain in the upcoming reboot for the MCU, and he's a pretty big Marvel character, so we gotta get Doctor Doom in there somehow, some way. Now, Victor Von Doom, aka Doctor Doom, is the rival of Reed Richards, very intelligent, has various magical abilities. He's basically runs his own country at some points, called Latveria, which is in Europe. So I want somebody who kind of has that European sort of background that could definitely have that appeal and look to him, but also have a commanding presence as Doctor Doom often does. And as much as I wanted to pick Mads Mikkelsen, we've seen him as a villain in the past in Doctor Strange, so I couldn't quite go with that one despite him being my number one pick. But my number one pick is actually Rufus Swell, who happens to be probably one of the more lower named actors or not so well known actors who's portrayed bad guys. He's the type of guy that you've seen everywhere, but when you see him, you know that's a bad guy. He can very much pull that off. Not to mention that he has that sort of cunning swagger to him that really gets under your skin just enough that you're like, something is not right with this guy. This is what he can bring to the table. Now for an alternate, I was sort of struggling, but I feel like the best option, although I'm not completely sold on it, and that's Nikolai Coster-Waldau, and I probably butchered that name, but you probably know him best as Jaime Lannister from Game of Thrones. Now, I feel like he has that sort of cunning charisma that really fits as to what Victor Von Doom can be. However, I feel like he also kind of has that too nice of a guy face where you don't necessarily believe he's a bad guy unless he really sells it. So I'm kind of back and forth on that one as a personal pick, but I don't know, there's just something about him that could fit that role, and I think he could definitely go toe-to-toe with John Krasinski's Reed Richards. So those are my picks for the Fantastic Four and Doctor Doom, and believe it or not, that was actually the easy part. But like I said before, let me know your thoughts and opinions, who you think should be the Four and Doctor Doom in the comment section. But the hard part is trying to figure out, how is this movie going to separate itself? How is it going to be different from the already previous two iterations that we've seen of the Fantastic Four, being in 2005 and 2015? What will set it apart? And as I mentioned before, Jon Watts will be the director of this movie. And not that that's necessarily a bad thing, because he did very much do a good job for the Spider-Man movies in the MCU. But what concerns me is that his style very much reminds me of Tim Story. Now, if you know that name, it actually happens to be the director of 2005's Fantastic Four, as well as 2007's Fantastic Four: Rise of the Silver Surfer. Now, neither of those movies that I just mentioned I don't think are the worst films or worst superhero movies by any stretch, but I do feel like the stylistic choices of Tim Story and Jon Watts are so hand in hand that it might match it kind of beat for beat. I mean, even the remake in 2015 kind of followed suit in some aspects as to how we get to know these characters. They go off into space, they get hit with the sort of cosmic rays, and then they come back and have these different abilities. They sort of butt heads for a while trying to figure out what their abilities are and how to best use them, and then they obviously have to come together to fight Victor Von Doom, who's trying to take over the city or whatever master plan he has at the time. And don't get me wrong, I think that there will be plenty of differences between Tim Story's version as well as Jon Watts' version. Because they mirror each other so well, it's going to be difficult to distinguish them, but there's one big factor that will distinguish Jon Watts from Tim Story's. And that one factor is quite simple. It's actually right in front of your nose. It's the MCU. I think that the greater connection to the MCU will be the obvious difference that sets this one apart. We'll be able to start making some incorporations with Spider-Man. Likely the Fantastic Four will be taking over the old Avengers Tower, as Tony Stark did move out of it during Spider-Man Homecoming. So we're likely to see them take it over and rename it maybe the Baxter Building. Maybe Reed will find some old Tony Stark tech, or there'll be some connection of Johnny Storm with maybe Peter Parker, or maybe somehow they have some connection to Doctor Strange or other New York characters like Captain America. There could be 1,001 different ways that this could work out, but I think that's the best way that they're going to make themselves set apart. They're going to bring in these other characters, hopefully not overbearing, interrupting the story, but enough that they're going to be different, setting themselves apart, having those influences from the past. Kind of similar to how Tom Holland's Spider-Man is influenced very much by Robert Downey Jr.'s Iron Man. I don't think, and I hope, that they don't go to that extent, but I think that that will be the difference maker here. The story will very much be the same, very much that origin story to the Fantastic Four, but they can change just enough to make it different and make it feel fresh and a nice little introduction to the MCU, that as we get the ball rolling and there's a sequel and they have a bigger role, possibly part of the Avengers or anything bigger than that, they might actually be able to work out pretty well and be able to set themselves even further apart and making them and solidifying them as our Marvel's First Family. So now I'm going to put it on to you guys. What do you think? Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comment section down below. Who should be cast? What kind of story do you think we should go with? Let me know all your thoughts and opinions down below. Also, while you're down there, smash that like button as well as hit subscribe to the Animated Apparel Company's YouTube channel. And also check out the link down in the description for the Animated Apparel Company's website where you can check out and find all the coolest, latest nerdy gear. Make sure you check that out as well. And if you want any more nerdy content from me, make sure to head over to my channel, youtube.com/Aaron Waller, and subscribe over there to make sure you check out anything new from me outside of AAC. But other than that, AAC Nation, thank you so much for having me once again. I really do appreciate it, and I hope to see you in the next one.